Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us in studio an extremely special guest, Curtis Yarvin, aka Mencius Moldbug, the man who coined the term the cathedral. You can find his work at graymirror.substack.com.
That's Gray with an A.
Gray with an A. You are probably one of the most influential subterranean thinkers of our time, whether for good or ill. Let me just start with this.
I like the word subterranean. I'm going to go with that. Like the 17-year cicadas. I feel like I came out of my hole or something.
I was thinking more Morlock.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. Like I only come up to feed, really. It's
So I am curious. We were talking a lot before we started taping. What was your reaction to seeing the term cathedral being used correctly on Fox News by the Federalist Ben Domenech?
As someone who coins memes, you're basically like, I kind of view that one as, it's almost like, for some reason, I don't want to see it used too much.
Because you're a hipster. You're a hipster. That's
I'm a hipster.
Why.
I'm just
you were against the cathedral before it was cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm also, I don't know if you know this, but I'm also the one who stole, I believe, the red pill from the Wachowskis.
Yeah.
And that one's, of course, I sort of don't want the other one. I don't want the cathedral to suffer the same fate as the red pill, because what happened is, I stole this, it's hard to conceive of how obvious it was in like 2007 when I did this, that the red pill was a left-wing metaphor, and it was all about, the horrible Matrix sequels where it's like the ravers, revolting against the empire,
right,
or whatever. It was really cringe. Right, and I was actually sitting in a cafe at Haight and Masonic, a block from Haight and Ashbury,
wow, in
San Francisco, and the walls in this cafe are covered with 60s hippie propaganda. It's really disturbing, actually. It's like frozen in amber. And, I realized that I could steal this thing, and so I stole it. And what immediately happened...
Reappropriated it.
I reappropriated it. I'm sorry, Wachowskis.
Yeah, or you colonized it.
I colonized it, right. I colonized it, right. I colonized the red pill. And the problem was that, I filled my red pill with like all kinds of nutritious goodness, right? These are expensive custom ingredients,
sure,
but people realized that they could basically take just, the packaging, open it up, take out the ingredients, and just put in like just heavy street shit.
Right.
So what immediately happened shortly thereafter is I'm using this meme that's just too good for me. This meme is out of my league. And this meme then gets stolen by two groups simultaneously.
There was a revolt.
The PUAs and the Nazis.
So you had it before the PUAs.
I had it before the PUAs.
Because online historians will make it out that the PUAs had it first.
Yeah, their timing is wrong.
Okay.
I certainly had never seen that. Maybe it was independent. If the
sure,
PUAs were using it before April 2007, I give them all the priority. I don't think that Nazis would steal it from PUAs, and I don't think PUAs would steal it from Nazis. So that's what makes my explanation preferable, but I could be wrong. Perhaps I don't have the priority. But in any case, basically, you come up with these, with a meme like this, and it's sort of, the concepts behind it are sort of somewhat difficult and hard to understand, and what is this thing that is not a thing? And then you're just like, people are going to take your meme and just rape it. Like, yeah, and so, yeah, I'm like, Fox News is beautiful. I love you, Fox News. But, like, that's what happens.
Let me ask you this. Don't you think that's kind of an inevitability with the use of jargon?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's no, like, I can regret the state of the world and yet believe in it. So, we'll see.
Like I've taken midwit from Vox Day. He originated that term.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
it is a good term. It's a really good term.
My idea of a good term is something that identifies a very specific phenomenon that everyone had observed but not codified.
Yes. What would your term for Vox Day be?
I mean, alt-right, I guess I would call him.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Sure.
I don't know him well enough to be able to pontificate on him, but I do want to give him the respect because he did have that. He did come up with midwit. This is what I really hate when people make fun of. first of all, he's got his book also, Such Just Words Always Lie, so he's got a lot of accomplishments. People have this idea that if someone is a one-hit wonder, which I'm not saying he is, but if someone has written one song that brings people joy, that person's a better person than you. You know,
Very
so
true.
this kind of this dismissal of like even one. So I do want to give him credit for that. Yeah, I was sitting down with Eric Weinstein. Did you watch his interview with Lex Friedman? This is going to be
did not.
a big circle jerk. So he had said two things, and I want to get your perspective on it. And he said this publicly, that when you went, the first icebreaker you had for him is you went up to him at a party and said, I'm the most right-wing person here, or I'm the most right-wing person you've ever met. I don't remember which one it was. And that he took this as, like, what am I supposed to do with this? Do you remember this interaction?
I don't remember
does
the
that sound
specific
plausible?
this with Weinstein. It sounds plausible. I'm not really that brash these days, so it would have been a while ago.
Okay.
But certainly, I'm always the most right-wing person in the room, in the proper sense of the word.
What does right-wing mean to you?
What does right-wing mean to me? Right-wing is fundamentally, for me, the most important kind of thing on the right versus left spectrum is essentially order versus chaos,
Okay.
or extropy versus entropy. I'm right-wing because I want things to make sense and not be fucked up.
Okay. So how does that tie into like traditional Republican ideas of like law and order?
Well, I mean, of course, order is the same thing. Order means that you can walk down the street and be very confident that you won't be attacked. Anyone who's been to Japan has experienced order.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, I think the legal system in Japan is a little bit strange, but they definitely have order. And, if you leave your laptop on the train in Japan, it will very likely come back to you, which is completely insane to an American and anyone who's ever been in New York. And yet, they take that for granted. And we basically walk around, for example, in a beautiful city such as this, with this sort of immense amount of, as far as our security is concerned, we're always in condition yellow. We're always looking around for threats.
Right.
We're always seeing things that are ugly and disgusting. And we're often seeing, like, every block or two, I walked here from Soho, every block or two, you see some scene of just incredible human degradation.
Yes.
And we basically take that, and then we worry that, the climate is getting warmer by, 1 degree every 50 years.
Right.
Right. And there's a sort of disconnection from these realities that we feel relatively easily, and we've blocked how, there's something in, I think it's a Chinese term called Paris syndrome. Have you heard of this?
No, I've not. I don't speak Chinese.
I don't speak Chinese either, but there's a Wikipedia page for it, so it must be true. Paris syndrome is experienced when you're a Chinese person from, a city where anyone can walk around, at any time of day or night, anywhere. There are no-go zones in Beijing. There were no-go zones in New York in 1940.
That's not true. Whoa. I was in Beijing on my way to North Korea,
Oh, really?
and I tried to go to Mao's tomb, and it was very much a no-go zone.
Yeah, but for not quite the same reasons.
Sure. I understand.
Sure.
Just,
Yes. It's
It's not exactly a liberal democracy in Beijing.
It is not exactly a liberal democracy, but they'll tell you. They'll tell you. They won't just maybe here they'll tell you.
Yeah.
But they'll tell you in a different way. But so we sort of we've blocked a lot of things that really should be very obviously notable about the lack of order in our society today.
Yeah.
That is and sort of what you're seeing on a walk from Soho to, what would you call this? Is this
Alphabet City?
Alphabet City. And a walk from Soho to Alphabet City is you're basically blocking, you're seeing horrible physical things. You basically see at least 5 people that could possibly be a physical threat to you. You're
Sure.
seeing some very ugly buildings. And you're just sort of surrounded by all of these are kinds of, anything ugly in any sense, whether it's human or physical, is a kind of violation of order.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so, as a right winger, I'm basically I'm sensing, I sort of try to sense the order that I think should be here. And that order is much more different from what we see today than it is to most people. And that's why I'm much more right wing than other people. I have an anecdote that I tell that kind of explains this point, or this kind of anomalous tolerance of all of these things, including, physical danger to yourself, which actually comes from my dad, who was a diplomat, and he was posted in Nigeria at the time. And my dad, by the way, is although he's simply Jewish, he looks like somewhere between Muammar Gaddafi and Ralph Nader. And once in Nigeria,
I can see the Nader resemblance in you. I can see it.
You'll see it more you'll see it more in my dad.
Yeah.
And once in Nigeria, he was mistaken for a Nigerian by a Nigerian. And they have Arabs up in the north,
okay.
so it's kind of it's almost understandable. But I believe this story to be true. And this other one I'm about to tell is true. So of course, when you're a diplomat in these in a third world country, your principal job or one of your main jobs is hanging out with rich scumbags.
Yeah.
Which is immensely entertaining and fun. If you've ever hung out with rich
most
scumbags.
certainly.
Yeah.
Hey guys, today we're welcoming back IPVanish VPN to the show. IPVanish has been a longtime sponsor of ours. It's great to have them back. So let me tell you about IPVanish. If you care about the security of your online activity, the easiest way to protect yourself is with IPVanish VPN. It's rated 4.5 out of 5 stars in Trustpilot. IPVanish provides an encrypted connection for all of your internet traffic, which helps to prevent websites, Wi-Fi providers, and even hackers from intercepting your data. You can help keep your financial details, personal information, and online activity safe from threats with IPVanish. Now, they've got a limited time offer. You can save 50%, that's half, monthly subscriptions and annual subscriptions by going to ipvanish.com/welcome. One more time, that's ipvanish.com/welcome. Let's get back to the show.
And so one day he's saying,
because let me interrupt. The thing about rich scumbags, which the plebs don't realize, which is my entire audience, is many of them appreciate the absurdity of their position.
Oh, they all appreciate this.
So they're like, all right, this is my life. You want to
this is my life, fuck my life.
You want to fly in some caviar and whatever? Okay, let's do it. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. None of them feel that, it's not that they don't feel that they deserve their position. They know that if there was merit, there was also a great deal of accident.
Yes.
And that's pretty universal to rich scumbags. Anyway,
it's like, okay, I worked hard, I built a company, therefore I could have oranges floating from the Himalayas. It's a non sequitur.
Yes, exactly. And so, my dad is hanging out with one of these rich Nigerian scumbags who acquires their wealth by a completely different kind of ill-gotten means. Sure. And they're in the north of Nigeria. It's not jungle, it's savanna. And this guy suggests, let's go hunting. So, he gives my dad a shotgun. They're going to go hunt birds, and they're just going to head out into the tall grass. And my dad is like, are there any snakes here?
Here in Africa in the bush.
and his host is like, snakes? Oh no, we don't have a snake. I mean, there's no snake. Once in a while you'll see a black mamba, but
wow.
And that's essentially the approach to sort of urban safety that basically a modern cool American who's 20-something, who lives in a place like this or a place like San Francisco, thinks is like, no, I don't worry about snakes. But occasionally you'll see a black mamba.
And to explain to the audience, the black mamba is, I think, the most venomous snake. They get like 20 feet long, and they will bite. They'll jump up and bite you in the face. And if you get bitten by one and envenomated, you're out. You're dead within like an hour. If that. You're done.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very aggressive snake.
Yeah.
And
like
really,
cobras are not aggressive. Cobras puff out because they're threatening you. They're like, get away! I don't want to bite you. They're actually cowardly.
Yeah, the mamba actually has fun biting you.
Yeah,
that's why Kobe Bryant called himself the mamba, and because it was fun. And so and likewise, when you're walking down the street in one of these cities, you may run into someone who is completely high and finds it fun to stab you, and that just happens occasionally. And
that happened on July 5th here in New York in Times Square. This was just an article yesterday where someone flung some mysterious liquid on some elderly person for no reason, didn't even look, and just ran away. And it was like, I don't know if it was acid or poison, whatever it was. Yeah, it's just like, there's no rhyme or reason to it.
Right. And so this is this is kind of a form of disorder, which is very extremely toxic and strange. And it's like when you look at, for example, what we call crime contains a lot of different factors. Even just like murder, you're like, is this a crime of passion? Is this like a drug hit? Is this, a predatory attack on someone? Is this for money? Is this for, like, there's a lot of different kinds of murder, right? But when you look at, say, first of all, when you look at like Victorian society, there's this line in Sherlock Holmes that's like, well, I don't see that what there is for a detective to do because we've conquered crime. Like I saw this this number on this came from somewhere parliament.co.uk. Hard to give a URL on your. I'm just too nerdy here, but it was number of offenses known to the police per capita in Britain from essentially 1900 till now. And that number had gone up by, I think it had peaked at about 50x. That's not 50%, that's 5,000%.
Wow.
So for example, if you look at my favorite kind of crime that measures kind of, intrahuman predation is robbery. And if you look at robbery in Victorian England, there was about one robbery per day in the whole of England. Now there's about like one robbery, per day in your house.
Yeah.
I mean, and that like that change, if that change had happened sort of suddenly, and you'd sort of suddenly gone from the London of 1890 to the London of today, people would be like, wow, you are suddenly being governed very, very badly.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of, really unnecessary disorder in the world. Or if you went sort of backward, and you said, okay, we're going to go from present conditions to the conditions of 1890s London where you can leave a laptop on the carriage or whatever. And, suddenly all this fear is gone. You'll feel like you do when you're in Japan. Even, a few years ago, I went to Boulder, of all places. And Boulder is, it's a university town. And I'm walking around like between like this conference and my Airbnb. And I'm walking through this large open park, and there's no lights in the park. And I realized, why does this park have no lights? And it's because they never had a problem. Basically, there's no, Boulder is one of these kind of all nobility towns. There's some middle Americans. It's mostly blue staters, and there's no underclass. And I don't know what maybe they have more homeless people now. Maybe they just like bus them to the river and dump them in. I don't know, but I didn't see that there either.
Yeah.
So you're basically, and when you're walking around in this place that's sort of, an urban park where you're like, holy crap, I know I'm actually, completely safe here, unlike any other urban park in any city I've ever been in, where I would be like hurrying along furtively and, checking the shadows for, I'm like, it's a completely sort of refreshing feeling.
Yeah.
And, that feeling is not coming at the expense of anyone. I'm not like taking away people's right to do crime. I don't think anyone has a right to do crime. And so, you look at this kind of very basic thing, or you look at just, the number of population migrations. I'm choosing my words very carefully here. The number of population migrations in the United States in the lives of those now living, which have happened because people moved because they were afraid for their physical safety.
Yeah.
That's quite non-trivial. And,
for sure.
And so, you're basically looking at these.
And also for their kids and many other factors.
And their kids and other factors, yes. And so you look at sort of factors like this, and then you compare them to like the like issues that people talk about, and you're just like, actually, the things that are historically important are just like completely ignored, or not even questions. Like the whole narrative has this kind of fakeness when observed from this perspective. And, you look at this fakeness and you're like, one of the things this reminds me of, just in the sort of the question of order, is one of the, sort of many fucked up things about how much of the kind of classical heritage we lost is that far too much of the material we have from the Romans that's in Latin is from late antiquity, because they were fucking Christians and they like copied all this shit. And we have enough of this material basically to realize, if you'll excuse my French, what fags these people were. And so there was this entire grammarian class, which was basically an intellectual class. Grammarian is Latin for fag, actually. And, these people were expensively educated. They were bureaucrats. They studied Virgil. They considered themselves, the equal of Virgil. And they just wrote each other these long letters full of just flowery garbage. And it's like you have, this entire huge volume of like letters of like Sidonius or Prudentius or something like that. and just full of letters to like back scratching some other aristo, or like doing it's like the Clinton administration or something out there, right? And they're all like, when you read those emails, they're all always scratching each other's backs, but the emails are like 10,000 times longer and full of flowery Latin shit. Yeah. And then every once in a while, he'll like drop some hint about what's actually going on. And he'll be like, oh, biggest dickus, I'm sorry I could not visit you this year because the roads were not safe. And you want to be like, why were the roads not safe? Who was on the roads? What was happening? Like, and these people are writing at the time of the fall of the Roman Empire, and they don't actually mention the fall of the Roman Empire.
Who will save the roads?
All right, so that's why I'm more a right wing than Eric Weinstein.
There's something else something else he said, and this is part of the podcast with him. He said that what he was put off. I'm going to see if I can guess your answer, see how well I know your mind, and then you could correct me or validate what I'm saying. He said you had said to him, this is gossip about like reactionary thought, that you were not allergic to white nationalism. Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
I would guess that what you would have meant is when it comes to someone who's a philosopher or thinker and trying to look at sociology or political economy, you can't a priori put anything off the table. That would have been my guess.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm not allergic to anything. Like,
okay,
I mean,
right.
like the idea of like, oh, I'm going to be allergic to like Mormons because of the Mountain Meadows massacre or some fucking shit is completely unworthy of, like, it's just laughable, right? I mean, imagine if you had that attitude toward communism. I'm not allergic. I almost wore my Shea shirt actually here. I have an authentic Cuban Shea shirt, which I should have worn. It was actually made in Cuba. I'm very proud of it.
I offered you a shirt with Cuba on it, and you declined to wear it.
Yeah, the design was a little loutre.
That's very true. By design,
it was,
no pun intended.
It was. In any case, basically, so that's sort of one thing I would have to say, about that comment. Imagine if someone is like studying the like 17th century, but they're like allergic to Catholicism or something. Like it would just be like completely unworthy of a historian to have like an emotional reaction to like some system of ideas. Like what? The second thing that I wanted to say is you mentioned philosophy and philosophers.
Yeah.
And there's a story I want to tell actually, and I think it's arguably related to this because I think this should be Eric Weinstein's attitude toward me. So, this is a story about Voltaire.
Okay.
I don't know that you've heard it. So Voltaire goes to Egypt. He goes, I believe, to Cairo.
This is a real story, not apocryphal.
No, this really happened. I read it somewhere. It probably happened. If it didn't happen, it should have happened.
Okay.
Voltaire goes to Egypt. He goes to Cairo. It's like the 1750s or something. And this is before colonialism. And Cairo is a very louche place. Right? It's really the moral standard is not high.
So like a Weimar.
Yeah, no, more so. Right?
More Weimar than Weimar.
So there's a lot of brothels, right? And his friend is super into going to brothels, so they do that together, right? And one day his friend comes to him and he's like, hey, Voltaire, let's try something a little different today. And Voltaire's like, what do you mean, different? And his friend is like, well, it's a brothel, but with boys. And Voltaire's like, oh, that's interesting. Well, as a philosopher, I guess I really have to have that experience.
Huh.
And so, because a philosopher is open to everything that is human, which includes boys. Okay. And so they go to the brothel and they do the brothel thing and they come out and his friend is like, hi, Voltaire, how was that? And Voltaire is like, it was pretty interesting. And so, they go home and the next morning, the next morning, his friend comes to him and he's like, hey, Voltaire. He's like, you liked that yesterday. Let's do it again. And Voltaire looks at him and he's like, no, my friend, once a philosopher, twice a sodomite.
No, twice a Keynesian.
and that's my, in some ways, I'm like, the idea, I return to my original, point, which is that the idea of someone who considers themselves a thinker of any kind, basically just like having any respect for this 20th century crap or regarding it in any way other than just like that of clinical pathology is just, it saddens me.
Oh, okay. We could have this argument then. Okay, we'll do that in a second. I wanted to ask something just quickly, which is not really possible with you. You were talking about earlier cities and ugliness. Are you familiar with, and what is your view of Jane Jacobs? Because in her book, was it The Rise and Fall or The Decline about Great American Cities, she posits that what makes cities sticky, I don't know if that's the term she used, what makes people want to stick in certain neighborhoods is the mixture you have of the old and new buildings. It's attractive to the eye. It shows a continuity with the past at the same time. When people tend to be in their neighborhoods, they're looking out for each other, looking out for crime. They tend to be familiar with their neighbors, and that gives that kind of civic society that we all want, which is much better than the state in terms of enforcing norms and some semblance of decency. Do you think she's mistaken? Are you familiar with her work?
I haven't read Jane Jacobs. I've certainly read plenty sort of summaries of this kind of, and of course, like, she's essentially stating the only reason that, such a thing needs to be stated is that you're living in the age of Corbu, right? So you're basically living in the age of these, like, masters of concrete who want to produce these basically French housing projects, and like literally, that film,
a few blocks away, there's one.
Yeah,
it's exactly the vision.
Right. And
Stuytown.
Yeah, Stuytown, right? Well, Stuytown looks a lot better than a lot of French housing projects, but you're basically like, or where I used to live in San Francisco, there was a very beautiful old brick hospital called German Hospital, and they tore that down and replaced it with what is now California Pacific Medical Center, which basically looks like a Czech secret police headquarters.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know how many people have like died in the Czech secret police headquarters, but it must be more than a few.
Yeah.
And so Jane Jacobs basically is out there, and she's still, she's not someone like Jane Jacobs. I don't know her. I haven't read her work directly, but she's really an illustration of one of these kind of conquest law principles that everyone is reactionary on the subject that they understand.
Right.
And so you'll constantly be talking to like...
Well, he said conservative, not reactionary. Nice. You just did a little bait and switch there.
Did he say conservative?
Yes, well, Robert Conquest, yes.
Yes, well, he meant reactionary. You must have had an experience, for example, when you were in, a party somewhere and talking to some like public school teacher who's basically, as lib as they come, and then get on the subject of like classroom management or classroom discipline and discover that she's actually like the second coming of Hermann Goering.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And because that's the subject that she knows. And on all this like bullshit where the media tells her what to think or what to believe, of course she believes whatever she thinks is the good belief as opposed to the bad belief, which she's allergic to. And, and this is like, I mean, yeah, and those beliefs that sort of come out of that kind of praxis, that expertise are, sort of respectable and worthwhile beliefs. And you just have to assume that for everything, there is some perspective like that out there that actually understands the problem.
Hey guys, want to talk to you about a sponsor that I'm really glad to be able to promote, and that's Fume, F-U-M. What is Fume? It's a natural inhaler that makes it easy to get the benefits of super plants on the go, but it's a great way to stop smoking or vaping. I'm looking at you, Dave Smith, very failed podcast host. If you go to breathefume.com, breathefum.com, you use code Malice10, you get 10% off your order. So Fume is like a steampunk vape. It's made out of Canadian maple. It's an inhaler. There's no electronics. And at the end, you stuff a core, which is filled with the benefits of super plants. So there's reassurance, which is from lavender, lemon and cinnamon. You've got conker, which is black pepper, peppermint, eucalyptus. You sit there inhaling it. It makes you feel better. But more importantly, your hand ritual, which smokers are often subject to, it's something to do with your hands to help you get off that horrible, horrible habit. If you go to breathefume.com and use code Malice10, you get 10% off your order, and you'll be helping yourself get a bit healthier whenever you quit smoking. Let's get back to the show.
Are you are you going to take the view that you're completely opposed to modernism as a kind of artistic?
No, definitely not. The thing about modernism is that why modernism sort of succeeded in many ways is that it was a very hard form, because to do modernism and to create something that's like on the level of like a Frank Lloyd Wright or Louis Kahn, or, like you can basically, you think, I don't know anything that was beautiful that Corbu ever designed.
Right. By design almost.
Yeah, by design almost. Whereas if you look at, Louis Kahn, like the Salk Center, like, that's actually sort of genuinely beautiful. Now, a lot of the, it's like when you talk about Jane Jacobs and the mix of old and new buildings, I balk a little bit, because the early modernists greatly benefited from that. They would basically put some like square modern-y thing in like the middle of like a beautiful like 17th century neighborhood. And of course it's striking and distinctive in that sense, but it's sort of stealing from its neighbors.
Yeah.
And, I just, the mix is like not, I'm just like, yeah, actually the old buildings are just better. It's like if you go, I was in Amsterdam, a couple years ago, and I just doing like a work thing. And I stayed in this kind of 19th century neighborhood in Amsterdam. And if you go basically in Amsterdam and you start kind of on the outskirts and walk toward the center, it gets older and older and older and more Dutch. And so the 19th century area as well, this could be, Germany, this could be, it's clearly continental.
Yeah.
If you go farther out, it's just anonymous globalist, strip mall, not quite strip mall, but trash, I assume. And you go in there and it gets more and more Dutch until you reach like the innermost tourist center, and which is just this cancer. But, And so the idea of, let's take these neighborhoods that are just like these canal neighborhoods that are just 100% Dutch and throw some like concrete monster in there, like, no, I'm not. I think Jane Jacobs is wrong about that.
Would you? Why? We're going to take a complete left turn. Why do you think Stalin won? And if you were advising the ruling class in America, would you advise them to be more Stalinist in their approach?
Why? How would I be advising them? Would I be advising them to be like, in their own interests?
Correct.
Okay. Why did Stalin win? Well, there's a new book out by Sean McMeekin, which I think is worth, just a very mainstream book of history, but it's called Stalin's War. And it's basically sort of quite sound, and it's a book on the subject of why Stalin won. It basically sort of blows apart the myth of Hitler's attack on Stalin as sort of an unprovoked attack on a peaceful,
Good Uncle Joe.
Peaceful Uncle Joe,
yeah.
Which people still, believe. You really should go and see some like American pro-communist propaganda from wartime. Like go and watch Mission to Moscow or something. It will really.
Song of Russia is another one. I'm writing about that right now.
Gotcha. Have you seen Hitler Lives?
No.
Ooh, Hitler Lives.
That's from that era?
So Hitler Lives is, and it's an American film. It's made in 1945. Its director is Don Siegel, who would later direct Dirty Harry. And the script, although it's not credited as such, is by Dr. Seuss. And it is cut down from a longer film by Frank Capra called Your Job in Germany, which is also worth seeing. And, of course, these are great American directors. And one of the nice things about this film is that it basically explains the reason you, the American soldier, just fought World War II. So the reason that you just fought World War II is that World War II was a race war against the eternal German and his eternal desire to conquer the world. And, in order to defend ourselves from the German conquest of the world.
From the Hun,
we had to fight this race war against the eternal German who must be kept down. Furthermore, we have these other demagogues at home who basically act like Hitler and like make speeches and stuff, and they need to be shut down. And instead, the world needs to be ruled by a council of wise men, including kindly Uncle Joe. And and all this is told in like you sort of recognize Dr. Seuss's voice in this script. It has this insidious tone to it. And
what rhymes with Zyklon?
It's just this nasty, like you're.
I guess every Jew I see from Zyklon A to Zyklon B.
What is with this guy? Did
I get it right?
Did you get what right?
This is the poem from the movie.
Got it. I understand the joke now.
Yeah.
No, you should definitely. I mean, if you see Dr. Seuss's wartime cartoons too, you've seen some of those.
No.
Like, oh man, Dr. Seuss is a wartime propagandist. Well, he would do these, of course, the bucktooth Jap was a huge specialty.
God.
So like basically the Lorax, but he's a bucktooth Jap.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, really, really sinister, strange, Der Stürmer tier stuff, right? And you watch Hitler Lives, and
have you read The Poisonous Mushroom?
No, what is the poisonous
That's
mushroom?
a book by the Der Stürmer people. What the Nazis were like, this is too extreme. I have it.
No, I have it too.
It's for kids. It's a kid's book.
I have this book as well, and guess where I got it? I got this as basically a war booty from my grandfather.
Well, it's been translated to English, and it's like, hey kids, here's how you can spot a the Jew. His nose looks like the number 6.
Yeah,
he's the devil. And the Nazis were like, dude, this is too much.
Yeah, no, it was really, it was absolutely considered. I looked this book up because basically, like some of my grandfather's possessions were being distributed to me. This obviously was not your kind of neo-Nazi English translation.
Right.
This was the real, this is real memorabilia. And so I'm like, what the hell is this Nazi children's book?
Yeah.
It was written by like this 18-year-old German girl, like this
No, this is
teenager.
by the guy who wrote Der Stürmer. It was...
Oh, no, this is a different one. I think there's basically
at
two
least,
in
yeah,
this
of course,
class.
yeah.
But no, it was drawn by the guy who wrote Der Stürmer, but the author was basically like a League of German girls, like, young German high school girl, which is just, no. And the shit, when you see this stuff on sort of all sides, you're like, this is berserk.
Yeah.
These people were all completely berserk. And the theory of World War II, of like the plot of Axis world conquest, is completely as fake as the international Jewish conspiracy. And it just didn't exist. And so you have this Matthew Arnold's poem, Dover Beach.
Of course,
Ignorant armies clash by night. That's basically, that was his vision of the future. And yeah, these people had no idea what they were doing on any side. And so the question of why Stalin won the war or did so well is that Stalin was perhaps the least deluded of all these figures. Again, the Sean McMeekin book, Stalin's War, is very worth reading.
So it's World War II and Stalin.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, World War II and Stalin. And, the McMeekin book is perhaps a little weak on the relationship between Stalin and FDR, which is not a relationship that anyone understands really very well. And a lot of that is probably going to, was done orally and will permanently remain secret. But you get the strong impression from the McMeekin book. He doesn't have specific evidence of this. I believe this to be true, that FDR knew the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was a trap for Hitler. FDR loved that kind of shit. And so, it's like if the American elites really believe that Stalin has thrown in his hat with Hitler and is siding with Hitler, then they react completely differently to him. And they just don't react that way. It's like a case of the dog that doesn't bark. Another hilarious fact about World War II that most people don't know, that I only found out actually very recently, is totally, this is totally normal. There's a Wikipedia page. During World War II.
Therefore, it's true.
During absolutely. And my Wikipedia entry is the most trustworthy of all, of course. And because it's Wikipedia. During World War II, for the whole war, from 41 through 45, there was a trade route in which American ships, American-made ships, full of basically natural resources and other, not actual weapons, are sailing under Soviet flags from San Francisco to Vladivostok to supply the Russians. Now, if you know where Vladivostok is...
It's northeast. That's the very tip. Right?
Yeah, and you basically have to steer your ship around to avoid bumping into Japan.
Yeah.
And so right under the noses of the Japanese, Hitler is being opposed by giant ingots of American aluminum. Why are the Japanese doing this? Why do they, they're neutral in, they have a neutrality relationship with Stalin. Right. And you look at this war and you're like, wait a second, when the Axis are trying to take over the world, Hitler goes this way and Stalin and Japan goes that way and they just win. Why do they not just win? Right. And they don't just win because there's no Axis. There's no such thing as the Axis. It's just a press release. There's no actual real military coordination there. And they don't understand that they're fighting a world war.
That's the thing. I
You know-
I learned that recently myself because I grew up in comic books. I'm a comic book character.
Yes.
And you always see Captain America punching out Hirohito and Hitler at the same time and
Right.
whatever, and Mussolini.
And Mussolini.
But then if you look, Hitler and the Japanese are not sitting down and plotting together at all. Hitler, Mussolini, it's a very different story.
Even there, like Mussolini's invasion of Greece basically comes as a surprise to Hitler, and he has to delay his invasion of Russia because of it. And that arguably loses him the Russia campaign.
Yeah.
Right. And so, these are these three powers, and, they have these radical 20th century ideologies. Behind these 20th century ideologies is a lot of the kind of force and energy of old 19th century elites, old nobilities, and so forth. The idea of these 19th century elites is that they believe in sort of the old pre-20th century multipolar international order. And so, when Germany in World War I says it wants a place in the sun, it wants its colonies, it's like, we want to be an equal to England. Like the idea of Germany sort of attaining supremacy over England, like there's no idea that, okay, World War I, it's a war for democracy on our side, therefore it must be a war for monarchy on the other side, and if Germany wins the war, there will be a Hohenzollern prince in London. Nobody's thinking that, right? Just like nobody in the Civil War is thinking, oh, if the Confederacy wins the war, we'll have like slave plantations all around Boston.
Right.
And so, there's a basic asymmetry there where one of these powers is fighting for independence and the other one is fighting for hegemony. And it's our side that is fighting for hegemony. And so,
And still is.
And still has it, in fact. And, it's basically, what we call the international community is sort of the kind of amorphous global successor of the British Empire, obviously, and that, that implies, and people will be perfectly frank about this, basically a diminution of sovereignty, in fact, really a loss of sovereignty of the nations incorporated into it. And so, Hitler is this weird, like, basically 4chan character, like he's really like a 4chan guy. And he has all these bizarre ass theories, but behind him is the kind of entire old elite of old Germany who are like, yeah, this, these are the July 20th people who are basically like, yeah, this anti-Semitism stuff is really retarded, but like, come on, we have a country again. Right. And so the US, of course, every time it receives, American diplomats receive any kind of notification from these German aristocrats that they're like, hey, if we just dump Hitler, will you make peace with us? The answer is always, fuck you. Right. And so it really is sort of, that war is a war between revolution and reaction at a certain level. It's just this kind of sound 19th century reaction is kind of overlaid with this kind of hallucinatory 20th century craziness that you find in, these fascist regimes at various levels. It's, of course, obviously everything from the 19th century is generally better. But, Stalin is completely, both Stalin and FDR, and it's very hard to understand we don't really understand that relationship, and we probably never will. Both Stalin and FDR are, sort of, they love playing chess. They love tricks, they love lies, they love deceit, and they love, they have this kind of deep, dark triad kind of Machiavellian thing going on. Stalin just completely outplays Hitler and still almost loses because the German military is so much better than his. Basically what happens when the German, everyone for months, and the papers are like full of this, everyone for months knows that the Germans and the Russians are massing forces on the border. This can't be hidden, right? And there's no sense in which it's like a surprise. And essentially the thinking of the Russians is, wow, our forces are we have 5 times as many tanks as the Germans here. We know, because we have an intelligence service that doesn't suck, that they don't know this. Here's what's going to happen. They're going to attack us. They're going to look like total assholes, and we're going to just drive them back and take all of Europe. And that's basically, Stalin's plan. So he wants to, just as FDR sort of wanted the Japanese to attack in Pearl Harbor, the question of his knowledge of that is still in some ways debatable, but I don't think it's very debatable. Stalin is basically like, okay, the Germans are going to look like they did this like surprise attack on us, but we're going to be ready for them. And we have our forces in this offensive posture along the border. You'll find all of this very conventional, well-reviewed book, Stalin's War. It's not McMeekin's hypothesis, but he presents it solidly. And what happened is that the Wehrmacht just like cuts through all of these forces and actually destroys this enormous concentration of forces on the border, which is positioned for offense, not defense, and basically just can't recover from the Blitzkrieg. And that's how kind of Stalin's plan goes awry at that point, but he's still got the kind of strategic depth to outlast Hitler. And Hitler also is making the same mistake on the Eastern Front that he makes on the Western Front, because since his objectives with Russia are also limited, he doesn't want to like create a new Russia. He doesn't want to return the czars to Russia. He actually only cares about Germans and, wants to reduce the Slavs to, the status of slaves. Well, I mean, the word is, apologies to any Slav readers out there. But if he actually had a sort of multinational vision and was like, no, we're going to restore old Russia, like the Wehrmacht are greeted as liberators, like as they go through Russia initially, and like the Ukraine especially. And then basically they realized, no, actually, like the Soviets lie about everything, except that when they told us Hitler was an asshole, it turns out he's actually an asshole, right? And so he would have done much better in the East if he had not been an asshole. And he also would have done much better in the East if his ambitions had been unlimited. Instead, he's following the same kind of like Haushofer, geopolitics thing where he's like, he has this vision that he sticks to. And his vision is like, we're going to like push the Soviet Union back to like the Urals and like have like a medieval like march where like marcher lords will become strong fighting the Bolsheviks or whatever. He doesn't just want to win the war. And so, his desire to basically destroy the Soviet forces and destroy the Soviet Union basically leads him to focus on, no, let's get this agricultural land, let's get this oil or whatever. And basically, he starts kind of making conquests before he wins the war instead of going straight really hard to Moscow. And similarly, on the Western Front, there's a lot of historical debate about this, but this is at least fairly plausible. He basically lets the British go at Dunkirk because it's the same thing. It's like, I taught you a lesson. Now we're equals. I have the continent of Europe. You have the oceans. Let's make a deal. And he, and he basically, he says to the British, he's like, look, if you make this deal, you'll preserve the British Empire. But if you don't, like, the Americans are just going to eat you. And, he happens to be right about this. Yeah. But, you're really like having this kind of, you'll note that this kind of discourse about World War II, well, everything that I've said is really mainstream. I guess maybe not the Stalin-FDR connection, but it would be hard to refute, certainly. That it's this sort of totally different thing from this frickin' fairy tale that we're told. And to bring, the question back to Eric Weinstein, since apparently he's talking about me, I can talk about him. I'm like, when you're basically have this kind of fairy tale view of the past and you view it as, a fairy tale rather than these kind of actions of confused and deluded and imperfect humans, then you kind of import the fairy tale into the present. And you're like, as a grown man, I mean, he must be, in his 50s and he's like, ooh, smells like the boogeyman, like, I mean, are we children?
Well, I wear child-sized clothing.
Well...
And I don't have pubic hair.
Yeah, I really thought that was a body double. But, Michael, I was drunk. You were drunk. I mean, let's forget it happened.
Look, we're philosophers.
We're philosophers. I was reading about, I was some history of like gay people.
I woke up, stroked your cheek, and said, "We're philosophers now,
honey." No, I was reading. There was some like group of notorious homosexuals, like Edwardians or something. Maybe even earlier, maybe Victorians, and they referred to the thing that they did as quote the method unquote. And unfortunately, there's a brand of like generic like cleaners that you'll see that is method. And I basically well, maybe it's juvenile of me, but I can't avoid making that translation.
I just recently read Bosie's autobiography. Bosie was
Lord Alfred Douglas.
I have a signed copy.
Oh,
he
my
was
God.
Oscar Wilde's lover.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he takes great pains to point out that they did not do that what you're thinking of. It was the other thing. So please get those perverted thoughts out of your head.
It was not the thing. It was not the thing. It was the other
what
thing.
do you think of me? How dare you, good sir?
I love the it was not the thing, it was the other thing.
It's amazing.
That's a brilliant limited modified hangout. It's like I did the thing, but I did not do that other thing.
It's like, okay, Alfred.
That's like I did not have sex with that woman.
It's literally the same thing.
Well, I mean, frankly, Michael, at that point, you've got to understand that nobody had invented lube.
Sheath, the official underwear of hunks and studs. Look at this stud in this ad. What a hunk and a stud. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use code Malice20, you get 20% off your order. Why would you want to do that? Well, it's the most comfortable underwear you'll ever own. So they have a stretchy fabric made out of moisture-wicking technology. They feel super soft. You stay cool in the summer months. What makes Sheath unique is their dual pouch technology. They have one pouch for one part of your man parts, another pouch for another part of your man parts. You're going to try them on. You're like, think this is weird. And then you will, like me, wear them every day. In fact, they have new materials like bamboo and mesh for even more cooling comfort. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use code Malice20, you get 20% off your order and you get to be in my pants, which is not exactly a seller's market, but it's true. You will get to be in my pants. Let's get back to the show.
Sorry. I really don't know how we got here.
Let's talk about something actually quite serious. And I asked you beforehand if we could talk about this,
Yes.
and you wrote about it publicly. That's why I feel comfortable bringing it up. Your wife recently passed away.
What a segue. I mean, but
well, I mean,
yes, my wife recently passed away, so I've decided to become a philosopher.
Any port in a storm. What I encourage people to do is when someone passes to share a favorite memory of them, because that's a good way to keep them here. That kind of shares them with other people. And I had a thread on Twitter, and people were sharing very nice memories. So I would love to ask you and how you're holding up, because I'm not trying to get you to be upset. But
yeah.
This is you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to.
I can talk about it. I don't know about the memory. That might be a little too private.
Okay.
Yeah,
maybe not a memory. You could tell us what she was like. You don't have to. I'm not trying to pry. I'm just saying this is my mechanism when someone passes to kind of preserve them. You know what I mean?
Yes. No. I can see doing it on the air.
And is there a charity that people can donate to in her name? I would love to have a Twitter thread and encourage people to do that.
My favorite charity is something, and she adored them as well. Is something called Delancey Street in San Francisco. It's part of the, it's sort of the part of the San Francisco homeless thing that is not part of the homeless industrial complex. Everyone who works there, other than the director, is a former homeless person, and they're sort of one of these groups. They're basically reactionary on the subject of how to rescue basically street bums.
What's their model?
Their model is basically, you're a street bum. You don't want to be a street bum. You come to us, and we basically come into the system, and we will tell you how to do everything.
Oh.
We will tell you how to live your life. We will tell you, we will give you a job. We will basically tell you who you can date. We will basically exercise fascist parent-level control.
But it's almost like AA,
life.
right? Like you tried it your way. It's not working. You're going to try it our way, and it's going to work.
Yes, except it's like inpatient. So
sure,
it's a little Salvation Army like, but I think though that group has deteriorated, quite a bit. I imagine. And I think expresses her values.
But I'm not trying to be. Let's take it away from her. But I always regard leftism as worrying about the forgotten. That the people who are at the bottom are the ones who are like, hey guys, let's not forget about these people. Don't you?
No. I have to.
Well, let me just clarify one thing. I regard one axis of left versus right with sympathy for the weak as opposed to empathy for the strong.
Yeah, but it's not real sympathy. And I think this is really, there's this great, in Dickens, he introduces this wonderful concept that he calls telescopic philanthropy. He, this is a character, Bleak House, I think, Mrs. Jellyby. And Mrs. Jellyby is basically very concerned. He's basically mocking the failure of this 1840s lib project called the Niger Expedition. That's Niger, which is pronounced Niger. You know that, of course.
Yes, of course. Niger, please.
Yeah, Niger, please. And I like the word neighbor, actually. And Mrs. Jellyby is like focused with this abstract sympathy that is far away from her.
Sure.
And is not concerned with the people around her.
Sure.
And so in her actual life, she acts very, very badly. And the thing about this abstract sympathy is that it's really, it's entirely orthogonal to real sympathy, and it really drives it out. And that's is what you see when you see, for example, the difference between something like Delancey Street or like Glide Memorial Church in San Francisco. If you go and, plenty of like rich tech dudes will go and volunteer at Glide, and they'll find themselves filling packets for the homeless, and the packet will have like, some soap and toiletries and, probably a gift card if they need anything, and some needles in case they need to shoot up. And, this isn't like, is this caring? No, this is what an addiction counselor would call enabling.
Yeah.
It's this massive sort of enabling system. And the thing about this abstract, two things about this sort of, sympathy for the weak, as you call it. I have no sympathy for this sympathy because,
Well, that's because you're right wing.
Yeah. And that's because I understand, sort of what's going on with this ersatz kind of porny feeling of empathy, which is really as different from real empathy as porn is from sex. And so what is going on in people's heads when they do this is that what's actually being stroked there is not their desire. Sorry, we keep getting back into philosophy, but
it was just once, and now I can't unring that bell.
I know, Michael. I know. And what's being stroked there is their ambition. Because essentially what you're saying, whenever you help someone else, you develop power over them. Whenever, to assist someone creates a dependency, you have one little etymological story I like to tell is the word lord in English. The root of this is the Saxon hlaford, which means, and the hlaf means loaf, and the ward means ward. So basically, it means you're the loaf protector. You're the loaf giver if you're the lord. And if someone is eating because of you, it doesn't matter if you don't, tell them what to do. You could start telling them what to do tomorrow, and they would have to do it. And so you basically, whatever you protect someone or become the guardian of someone, you feel yourself growing stronger because they're basically in your retinue. Like, a medieval nobleman would be like, how many men in livery do you have? Right? And that's your kind of physical strength. Now, obviously, you're not gaining any sort of actual strength in any way by sending, $1,000 a year to Glide Memorial so they can basically, feed the pigeons and enable people who actually need help and not enabling. But you're still, you're like a dog chasing a ball. You have this predatory instinct. You don't really know that that's not meant for chasing balls. It's actually meant for your wolf ancestors to chase rabbits, but you're still going to chase the ball. And, and understanding that what you think of as kind of universal empathy, or if you go really, to the extreme, you get like the effective altruists, for example, and they're like, I will extend my empathy to all humans on the planet. And then they're like, wait, why just humans? And actually, I think there was a Scott Alexander post recently where he's like, talking maybe tongue-in-cheek, but maybe also seriously about his empathy for not just all the mammals of the world, but he's actually gotten all the way to the bugs, right? And I'm like, sympathy for the bugs. This is really like, even if he's, saying this tongue-in-cheek, there are others who are not, and they're basically, I'm going to be a vegan or a vegetarian, but I'm not going to eat the bugs because I love the bugs, which is not, in my mind, the reason not to eat the bugs. And so you have this empathy, and even when they're basically like, I love the
bugs is the basis of like life on this planet.
Ultimately, ultimately,
the biomass is bugs, and everyone's eating the bugs.
Chickens eat the bugs, whatever. Yeah. I'll eat the chickens which eat the bugs. Sure. I will not.
You eat crab, you eat shrimp.
I do, but I don't eat bugs. I don't eat bugs.
Okay, just to confirm, you don't keep kosher.
Yeah, I don't keep kosher, but I also don't eat bugs.
Okay,
and but the thing is, the mindset of someone who's like, I am more a spiritually evolved being than you because you care only about the mammals and I also care about the bugs, right? And it's just like this is not. Yeah, and then this is supposed to be compared to like the affection that you would feel like for your sister, right? And these are two just different things. And when you look at the kind of the ersatz empathy, you might say, well, okay, this is not really the same thing as the empathy that you feel that's a real emotional bond with people.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Maybe it does sort of good things in the world. And the problem with that is that maybe it does good things. You think it does good things, but maybe it's actually doing bad things, and you just don't know that.
Yeah.
And when you look at
if I'm coming from love, by definition, the goals will be love.
Yeah. If you're coming from love, it's to me, it's like when you, if you're coming from love and the, result is the opposite of the intent, you feel very, very bad. Imagine you're basically on the, walking down the street, you see like a motorcycle crash. You're the first on the scene. You're like, you feel an immediate, this is a human being in your presence. You feel sort of immediate sympathy for this human being who's right there with you, and you want to help him.
Assuming
you go
they're not
and
fat.
He's lying there on the sidewalk. There's blood. It's not pretty. And you pull his helmet off and try to give him CPR. Well, when you pulled his helmet off, which you really should not do if you see a motorcycle accident.
Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you
it's
just
keeping the head together?
Yeah, you just broke his neck and you now paralyzed him for life.
Okay.
And if you were informed of that and you were like, well, you were trying to help this person, but actually you're completely ignorant, you were not paying attention in your like high school CPR class where they told you not to do this, and so you just destroyed this person's life while trying to help him. You would be a little broken up about that, at least if you were not a psychopath.
Right.
Right.
A lot broken up.
Yeah, a lot broken up. But let's take, for example, you remember the Arab Spring?
Of course.
Were you into that shit?
What do you mean into it?
Were you into it? Did it get you off? Did it get you hard?
No.
When you saw like Google guy on TV where you're like, we're going to bring freedom to the people of Egypt.
I'm not a democracy
You're not,
person.
Yeah. Okay, good. So, but most Americans did. So basically, they're like, and they hear Obama, even a neoconservative, even if Allah will allow me to utter that term.
God is great.
God is great. And he created neoconservatives for some reason. And one day we'll figure out what it is. So, here you have all of basically America that believes in freedom, that believes in love, that believes in all these beautiful things. And it's like, hey, wait a second. Why have we been supporting these dictators in the Middle East? And, we're propping them up. And propping them up is basically sort of a term of art that means not overthrowing them.
Right, yeah.
And
but often sending them money.
Yes. Well, sure. Yeah. Sending them money. I mean, we just run it off on the printer, basically.
Yeah.
But sure, we're propping up these dictators, right? And but of course, if you go and say, if you roll Obama out and you put the line on this teleprompter and he's like, Assad must go, or Mubarak must go, you're either basically creating a revolution or a civil war in that country. I mean, you could roll him out to Germany and he'd, have him say Merkel must go.
Yeah.
And you'd start something, and that's the level of soft power. Like you're just like, those instructions are clear. And what actually happened internally, I believe, is basically it was kind of a battle between two factions inside the state. So basically the old guard, is like, oh yeah, we need stability in the Middle East. I understand it doesn't sort of fit American principles, but sometimes you've got to make an exception for the real world. And then the young guard is like, I've been watching The West Wing, and what would Martin Sheen do, right? And so the young guard, kind of wins this one, and they start all these revolutions in the Arab world, and it kills 500,000 people, and is a total shit show and a fiasco, and the only country in which it works even remotely is Tunisia, and even Tunisia's kind of gone to hell. And, what does the American viewer do when they've basically done this thing with a motorcycle helmet to 1 million people? They change the channel.
Yeah.
They give a fuck.
It's never brought up again.
It's never brought up again. It's just like, oh yeah, sorry, that didn't work out well. And, actually, even if you were in the State Department and you were basically part of making this disaster happen, like, you got promoted, you made an impact, you changed the world, right? And so, this...
It's on the headlines.
It's on the headlines, right? You matter, right? And because you matter, you're promoted. And so, the connection when you have this kind of abstract empathy, it's actually... It's distinct from the natural empathy
100%.
toward the weak that you feel in a sort of good Christian sense when you see them, or when you sort of think in a level-headed way about them. It comes out of your ambition and your desire to have clients and be a big and powerful man.
Yeah,
which is again very natural in humans. And then because it has these kinds of poisoned roots, you actually don't really care whether it's actually working or, acting counterproductively, which means it's usually acting counterproductively. So, you can see why people sort of fall into the cult of thinking this way, but it's an essentially satanic way to think. It's a good summary, I think.
We're running out of time.
Shit.
What has been your favorite part of this interview?
I think it was probably, Michael, all the philosophy.
You are welcome.
Hey, everyone, before you go, if you enjoy this podcast, you might enjoy some of the other podcasts available this week at gasdigitalnetwork.com. This week, we're highlighting the Real Last podcast with hosts Luis J. Gomez and Zach Amico, who is one of the funniest people at this network. I'm a huge fan of them both. You can find the full catalog of episodes on demand at gasdigitalnetwork.com or catch the latest 20 episodes anywhere you find podcasts. Here's a clip, doggy.
Anyway, I do like her, and I'm sorry I'm being mean to you. You know I'm just joshing you, right?
Yeah.
That's Shane's online persona. He's an asshole, but he's actually just a nice person.
No, I feel bad about it. I objectified you. You couldn't hear it with the mic.
Women like to be objectified. They're all lying.
Yeah, this is all in good fun. Hey, leotard and reatard. Next joke.
I'm putting that on my business card. Leotard, reatard.
Hold on, I'm gonna.
Your fucking business cards.
I'm gonna need you for this next. This next. Stay here.
Her business card is a pair of panties she leaves the next day.
Just read on the inside.
I mean,
it's pretty funny,
I'm
isn't
not
it?
hungry, because then I have to eat them. So
What?
That needed a tag.
Do you guys want to try to do a quick round of plugs while he's away this time?
Yeah.
I just have this.
never mind.
This ink. Oops. I sprayed you with ink.
What? Dude, she goes,
Look at that.
it's funny, she got serious. She goes, but this is like going to disappear, right?
Yeah, it doesn't. It's just not disappearing ink.
Yeah, this is $35 on Amazon, you piece of
This
shit.
might be worse disappearing ink before I looked at the bottle, and I never once confirmed that it's actually disappearing ink.
This might be worth the
so
entire
blue.
weight that Lewis just fucked up that leotard.
It's only disappearing ink if it's what Lewis signs his child support checks in.
Yeah, he goes, Beatrice, you can't cash a check with no autograph on it.
Fuck yeah. So that ink will disappear.
Eventually.
Oh fuck. Well, eventually eventually we all disappear, you know?
So that sounds like a threat that he's going to tell her on the car ride home.
Fucking blue ink.
I have to take an Uber home and then
I actually think it already disappeared.
Yeah, no, I think it's disappeared. I think it's gone.
Ta-da!
Fuck you. I love that now he's not. He has no confidence. His confidence is shot in his tricks.
Yeah.
And dude, he had to go buy. He bought disappearing ink. Lewis, how do you not know it's the disappearing ink you bought? We go, oh no, it's just like the other ink that I.
You don't have other ink around the house. You're not writing.
Yeah, what do you have, a quill pen? You use a fucking feather to write letters? Curious James, one day you'll read this, and the world will be a different place.
Zach, do punch up on this. I'll send you 3/4 of my ink.
Zach, I have a messaging bird bringing you my latest scrolls.
Hell yeah. She's rubbing herself. Hell yeah.
I'd
Hell yeah.
really like to be there in the morning when Lewis is hungover with eyeliner on.
Oh, dude, when
Just looking in the fucking mirror, like, oh god.
It's waterproof too, so it's not going to come off for a while.
We're doing another trick. The lovely Jessica, everyone. Give it up for the lovely Jessica. Come on, everyone.
Yay. Jessica.
Yeah, all right. Fair to Midland.
All right, so here's what I need, Jessica.
Daniel, you seem tired, bud.
I'm tired. I'm hungry.
You're gassed, dude. Go get the mac and cheese and bring it in. Or do you have Bay? Bay will be pissed.
Come over
Yeah,
here.
Ben and I are eating.
Well, you don't know. We can
cheese.
stand. No, we'll sit. We'll sit. Come here.
Bay's gonna get you for not eating that cheese.
No, I'm
Okay,
I'm
so
gonna
Jessica,
get
do
that
me a
cheese.
favor. Show here.
Just go.
Show everyone your
Now I
hands.
could see that it is material. I didn't think it was material.
Now turn them over. Now bring them toward me.
This is the first time we've ever seen Lewis and thought that's material.
Make two tight fists. Okay. Now, Dan, I want you to pick one, left or right.
Left.
Okay. So what I want you to do is take your right hand away. Jessica, you pick left. I'm gonna take my left hand as well. Okay. And I'm gonna take some blunt ashes.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm gonna start rubbing them into the center of my hand. Jessica, do you tell me? Really concentrate on the center of your left hand, Jessica. Concentrate on it. Really? Do you feel anything? Do you feel anything in the center of your hand, Jessica? No, that's not your fingernail, Jessica. Do you feel anything? Do you feel anything in your hand?
I feel fear.
Do you feel anything?
I feel like I want to go home.
I feel my Nana trying to reach out to me from beyond the grave.
Oh, Jessica, run!
Show your hand to the camera. Show your hand to the camera. Show your hand to the camera. Your bodily rent.
There's ashes there.
Wow.
There's no way I looked at that girl and didn't think she had sunburns on her.
Yeah, come on. What are we doing?
Stinkmata. Fucking look at this guy.
Get into your head.
That's a good one.
That's good.
Now you obviously you just put a quarter in your mouth during a pandemic.